For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
We've been waiting for you.
The force is strong here, even stronger than the coffee.
Welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. Here are your hosts, Dan Z and Corey Clubb.
Hello, this is Corey Clubb, and welcome to show number 18 of Coffee with Kenobi, a Star Wars podcast that analyzes our favorite saga in a whole new way. With me is my good friend and co-host, Dan Z.
Hello, everybody. What an amazing journey we have had here at Coffee with Kenobi these past few weeks. Our bloggers are once again making big names for themselves, and we are continually in awe of their time, generosity, and talent. Craig Dickinson, our Rebels reviewer and regular guest, appeared on the recent episode of the Star Wars Kids Cast and is really making a name for himself as an educator and fan extraordinaire. As we mentioned last time, Becca Benjamin was on a recent episode of the Cantina Cast, and her most recent blog entitled A True Joining in the Force has earned some rave reviews from our listeners. In addition, our newest member, Aaron Harris, wrote his blog on how Disney saved my fandom and received attention from the online publication The Daily Dot. We are so lucky to have them in our Coffee with Kenobi family. Well done. I was also lucky enough to appear on the latest Assembly of Geeks episode entitled Assembling the Geeks. I got to interview Scott about geek culture and podcasting. Be sure to check it out.
In today's show, we talk about the gigantic news concerning casting for Episode 7 and the official answers to what will happen with the expanding universe. This news completely took over the internet, and we'll be here to break it down on what happened with BBC culture editor Christian Blauvelt, as well as our thoughts and a few more extra surprises as well. In our discussion segment, we share a cup of coffee with returning guest Scott Murray of Assembly of Geeks. We're happy to have him back with us as we continue our discussion of the existing Star Wars films in reverse order. Today we discuss our topic for show number 18, The Empire Strikes Back, and it may not go exactly as you might have expected.
We will also have the next offering, your Espresso Shot with a Bearded Trio featuring Rob Wainfur. And now, let's see what's brewing in the Star Wars universe this week.
Oh, wait. This is interesting.
You found something.
Hi, this is Christian Blauvelt, Deputy Culture Editor of BBC.com, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z and Corey Clubb. This is the podcast you're looking for.
Hi for our first news story and second news story, and just about every news story we've ever wanted to cover on Coffee with Kenobi. We had to have Christian Blauvelt come in with us. He's the Deputy Cultural Editor of the BBC. We've got Episode 7 actual news. We've got stuff about the EU and Legends. And Christian, thank you so much for being on Coffee with Kenobi to have a cup of coffee with us to talk about these amazing things happening in the Star Wars universe.
Dan, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here. I really love the show, everything about it from the title on down. Coffee with Kenobi. It's the way to start your morning right.
I like that.
That's good.
Oh, good. We've got another radio bumper for us.
Nice.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, we Star Wars fans know you from your excellent contributions to fandom, and of course you're in the Force cast and talk a lot about the Clone Wars episodes and all good things Star Wars. But today, Christian, we've got a very unique opportunity to talk about the Episode 7 casting. Where were you when you found out about this, and how has the news hit you so far?
I was at work today at the BBC. It was around noon when I got an email from a PR blast from Tracy Kenobi at Lucasfilm. Mm-hmm. And I was so excited. I mean, it was like one of those moments when you realize, I'm probably not going to get much work done for the rest of the day. But no, I thought it was fantastic. And I mean, these past few days have just been such a whirlwind. First with the EU revelations, and then now this, and this is so intriguing because the mix of returning vets from the original trilogy are really, and in the case of Kenny Baker and Anthony Daniels, all 6 films, and then some legendary pros like Max von Sydow. I mean, amazing addition. Some new, some up and comers, some like really hot young actors like John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, Adam Driver. I mean, great additions, and then a total newcomer, total unknown in Daisy Ridley. So it's a really interesting mix of personalities that they've assembled for this film.
It's very exciting. And then you throw in Andy, is it Serkis? That's how you pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Wow.
Andy Serkis.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I've been a huge fan of his work for a very long time. And I think that with something like this, he's going to get even more attention than he has before from not only niche fans like ourselves, but just from the world in general. And I'm going to assume that he's going to do some sort of motion capture thing, but maybe not. Have you heard any kind of buzz on this at all?
I haven't really, in terms of exactly who he'll be playing. I would assume he's playing a motion capture character, but you never know. So far, Lucasfilm has been throwing us some curves with this news every now and then. It's like you expect certain things, and then it doesn't quite turn out the way that you were. I mean, just like in the months leading up to this, there are a lot of names that actually weren't part of the cast list today were thrown out. People thought that maybe Lupita Nyong'o from 12 Years a Slave or Jonathan Rhys-Meyers or Saoirse Ronan might be involved. None of them turned out to be involved. So it's with Andy Serkis, I mean, if I had to bet money on it, I would say that he's probably going to be doing a motion capture character, and then that's just like, well, then what kind of motion capture?
Right?
Yeah. So it's very exciting. I mean, he really could be doing anything. He's such a talented guy.
It opens up a whole world of possibilities, and when you look at when Jar Jar first came out in episode 1, he seemed so lifelike and realistic, and now you've got the guy who is like the Walt Disney of this concept. He's the one who's created all this new amazing ground with what motion capture is. I mean, even thinking about the Planet of the Apes reboot, and the sequel, of course, is coming out very soon. The possibilities for him are endless. And you mentioned Max, and we've got all these unknowns. It's like the ultimate Lucas casting as far as what we've got. I personally, clearly the worst kept secret in Hollywood the past year and a half is that the big three are back. But now they actually are back. Who would have thought 10 years ago that Harrison Ford would ever agree to be Han Solo again?
Yeah, I was just thinking a few minutes before we started talking about, 2005, Revenge of the Sith comes out. I remember I was still in college at that point, and I remember thinking after it was over, wow, this is probably the last Star Wars movie we'll ever get to see in a theater. I mean, aside from reissues and re-releases, but this is probably the last time we'll see a new Star Wars film, and that was a really powerful moment. But here we are, 9 years later. We've known now for 18 months that we're going to have episode 7 and a whole new trilogy and spin-off films and everything. It's just, and today, I don't know about you, but it started to feel a little bit more real to me that this is actually happening, that in 18 months, we're going to have a new Star Wars movie. It was incredible.
It really was. I don't know how much you've listened to the show in the past as far as me babbling on about what I do for a living, but I am a high school teacher. And when Corey sent me the text, it seems like I could be on Twitter 25 hours a day. But then I blink for 1 minute, and Corey somehow will send me a text and say, hey, guess what happened? The cast is announced. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? So I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I had a very hard time focusing on work for the rest of the day and molding these young minds when my young mind was just spinning with all the possibilities. But like you said so beautifully just now, Christian, it seems real now. I mean, it was real before, but now it's just not speculation and innuendo and hype. It's real. We're going to see a sequel to Return of the Jedi with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford and Peter Mayhew and Kenny Baker and Anthony Daniels. And it's just something that blows your mind. Corey, how did you handle this news?
I like I said, I heard it first. I was at work as well, and it's almost like your work day is like, well, that's it. I'm over. I'm done. And of course, my first reaction was to text you and kind of one up you a little bit, get to it as fast as I could.
You did.
But like you said, Christian, you put it so well. It's like, this is like a dream come true. And this whole journey we've been on ever since the announcement was been like, wow, we're living this moment right now. It's just a wonderful feeling to be able to just see these characters come back to the screen. And then just everybody's excitement about it, too. Just the buzz on the internet and the buzz between fans and just getting excited. It just makes you feel really good to be a fan of the series and these characters. And it's just, like you said, it's nice to be able to sit down and go, okay, I lived through this and I got to enjoy it and go and see it. And I didn't get that back in 1977. I wasn't born till 82, but I can go in, I can sit down in the theaters and enjoy it, and my kids can go with me, and we can all enjoy this wonderful saga as it continues on. And it's just wonderful to see that online. Like I said, the buzz and all this other stuff, the news junkets picking this up and just going crazy. I tried to get on the StarWars.com, and it was down.
It exploded.
It was down for a long time, and like I said, Twitter was just going nuts. And this just the few tweets that I saw coming out here and there, people are like really excited, really ecstatic about the announcement because it's such a great cast, and I'm really looking forward because it's a big question mark. But a lot of the other tweets that I saw coming out were kind of biased on as far as the gender roles, and I know they didn't put too many in. There's two that we know of, and it's I think it's a moving thing. It's a thing we're not sure about yet, and I think if they put all the gender roles out there and all the characters out there are all in one lump, we kind of get the ideas of the storyline. We want to be excited by that. I think that they did that for a reason. But what do you think, Christian?
Yeah, well, the question is this like the entire main cast, or are there could there still be a few names forthcoming that have not yet been released, or that contracts that haven't actually been locked down just yet? I mean, it seems like this is pretty much the final cast. But, with these kind of things, I think there's probably always room that, we could hear one or two more names in the time to come. In terms of, and definitely, I hear what people are saying, that there really are only, two, that based on this cast, there are only two major female roles in this film. I mean, there's Princess Leia, and there's the new character played by Daisy Ridley. Of course, it's a possibility that Daisy Ridley could be the star of this film, that she will be like the new Mark Hamill, an unknown who's, basically our protagonist here. So I'll be very excited to see what she does. But yeah, I can appreciate some of the discontent about that for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly something that peppered our Twitter feeds, and I'm sure it did yours as well. And when you see something like this, you realize this is a franchise that for 30-plus years have not had a lot of strong female characters. So I think a lot of people were looking to Episode 7 to maybe change that a little bit and change the glass ceiling, if you will. But is it fair to say that it's too early to decide if there are gender issues in Episode 7? Because as you mentioned, we don't have a full cast yet. And of course, Variety is already reporting, as we mentioned, there is another important female lead that is yet to be revealed.
Interesting. Yeah, I think as a result, it really might be too early to come up with any sort of judgment about this just yet. I think that part of what people are drawing on here is lingering dissatisfaction over the way the female characters were presented in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek Into Darkness, particularly Alice Eve's gratuitous lingerie scene.
Yes.
I think that really did rub a lot of people the wrong way, myself included. I'm a big Trekker as well, and that really just did not, even though there have been so many scantily clad women in Star Trek over the years, that just felt like particularly gratuitous and clumsy in the way it was handled. So yeah, I can understand that there are some issues here, and it's a cast of a lot of men. There are a lot of dudes here, and then just two women so far. So we'll see how it shakes out. But
exactly, you never know what kind of surprises and twists JJ is going to bring, and the fact that we have Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia back in the fold. She's arguably the most famous female character. Wouldn't it be fun to see Ashley Eckstein show up as Ahsoka many, many years later as Ahsoka Tano? Wouldn't that be fun?
Huh. That would be amazing.
That really would.
It would be so great. I think what's interesting about Ahsoka is that the initial feeling about the new direction for Star Wars was that I think from the get-go there was concern that it was going to be very kind of boy-centric, like that the franchise was going to be geared toward young males, teenage males in particular, the way that other Disney properties of late seem to have been. But then you see Star Wars Rebels, and that there are two very prominent female characters on that show, kind of, upending the idea that that's going to be necessarily just like, kind of a boys club program. With episode 7, it could be the same thing easily. I mean, it might really surprise us. Daisy Ridley could be the star.
I love that idea. I hadn't thought about that before. And the Rebels comparison is perfect because as the character rollout commenced, we saw the female characters towards the end of that announcement. And then fandom went crazy and all was forgiven and all was happy. And I have a feeling that's going to be the same way with episode 7. I do think that it's important to, again, realize that we're all Star Wars fans. We all love Star Wars. There are different ways and reasons and rhythms that it speaks to us. So we can disagree, but I'm going to encourage fans not to be disagreeable because we don't have all the information yet. So speak with your mind, speak with your passion, speak with your heart. Just don't try to hurt someone else's in the process.
That's really well said.
Yeah.
It's so true. And, the way I see it, like Star Wars is a big tent. There's so many different. There should be room for everybody within it. And room for so many different kinds of characters and so many different points of view and so many different kinds of stories. And in a way that kind of sums up my feelings about the changes to the expanded universe and turning it into Legends as well. That actually I think that's an okay thing because I feel like Star Wars is expansive enough that it can accommodate different continuities and universes, so to speak. That it's just there really should be something for everybody in this franchise. It is that big.
Wait, perfect and a beautiful transition to what we wanted to talk about. If it wasn't for the episode 7 casting announcement, it still feels great to say that out loud. I still can't believe we're going to see Harrison Ford in more Star Wars. But anyway, we've got the answer to what people have been thinking about and worrying about and angsting over for a long time. The future, the fate of the expanded universe. Christian, what kind of impact does this have on Star Wars fandom and the new canon?
Yeah, I feel like that a lot of the announcement was met with such an uproar on Twitter when it was made. There were so many fans who were just devastated and so upset by this. And personally, I love the EU. I've read somewhere in the ballpark of like 50 to 60 novels. I've played all the games. I've read so many of the comics. I love all this stuff. It's been a huge part of my life for, really almost 2 decades. And personally, I always bought into the notion that they were canon. I bought Dan Wallace's The New Essential Chronology. I studied it closely. I really felt that they were integrated with the films, that they were on an equal playing field, except for when they would conflict. And there would be a lot of continuity conflicts, and some texts were basically kicked out of the canon, long ago, like the Jedi Prince series. And so, to begin with, the expanded universe always had a lot of conflicts. There were a lot of overlaps. Things that just didn't quite make sense every now and then. But it also became clear, and the Clone Wars TV show really hammered this home, that basically George Lucas could overwrite it whenever he wanted to. And so really, to me, the announcement of the expanded universe and the existing titles becoming Star Wars Legends is just kind of an extension of that idea that, the filmmakers can take whatever direction they want to take, regardless of the novels and comics and games that have been published. The fact is, though, those books and those games and those comics, they still exist. You can still enjoy them as stories.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if, they're no longer necessarily canon with what's going to be presented in episode 7. I mean, they're still good stories.
There are still amazing memories that no one can take from you. It reminds me of Fahrenheit 451, really, where, the firemen, of course, burn all the books and burn all the literature. But at the end, you realize, spoiler alert if you haven't read a book that's over 45 years old, those stories are still with you. They're in your soul. They're a part of you. The expanding universe was never canon. It was always something that people loved and enjoyed, and you could use it and put it in beautifully with the films if you wanted to. But as a casual Star Wars fan, or even a regular Star Wars fan, a lot of people were put off by the fact that either Lucas didn't have a direct say in the stories, or they contradicted how they viewed their characters. Well, now we don't have to worry about that because we've got legends. And I don't know about you, Christian. I'm going to assume you're a comic book guy. You like superheroes. I know that Corey and I do. And comic books do this all the time. How many times has DC rebooted their universe? Plus, we've got the film versions of the comic books. We've got the comic book versions of the comic books. So those stories are still there. And they're given a lovely, loving tribute on StarWars.com. That video was almost 7 minutes long. I thought you're almost moved to tears by the reverence they have. And now it's got the title Legends on it. Legends is a pretty powerful statement.
I agree completely. And, if DC can have multiple universes, if Marvel can do the same, even Star Trek has done that with the J.J. Abrams films. Why can't Star Wars have multiple universes? Star Wars is large. It can contain multitudes, to paraphrase Walt Whitman. I mean, there's so much that can, there's so many different perspectives on it. And I think that the fact that those stories still exist, if Disney had announced that they were, going to take all of those books out of print or something, okay, then I would be appalled.
Yes, and rightfully so.
Yeah, but that's not happening. They still exist. But this, allows for surprises with the new movies and allows the filmmakers' creative license to go in completely new directions, so we can all really be surprised, which I think is great. And then B, this new canon, which is going to involve the novels going forward being completely integrated with the TV series and the movies, is drawing upon the talents of EU authors we like such as James Luceno and John Jackson Miller and Paul Kemp. I mean, it's building off the foundation of the expanded universe. So, if suddenly we're to take a completely different direction and the old books were to be taken out of print and none of the old authors were being used, there would be a problem. But that's not the case here.
Exactly. You guys put it so well, and I've read numerous EU books, and they're beloved. They're stories you can pick up and read again and again. And just like what you said, Dan, comic books from 30 years ago are still loved and owned and just enamored at because they're good stories. They're just stories that will live with us forever, and we can enjoy them as long as we want. And like you said, Christian, these authors are still going forward with new stories. I bet they're excited as well to be able to jump in and tell a brand new story that's original. And also, it's like they haven't shut the door on this Legends series. They can, authors can go in and pluck items they want to use, characters they want to use, and say, hey, you know what? Let's put this character in this book or things like that, and that could be anything. So anything is really up for grabs. It's not like it's closed the door on it, it's dead to us. But I'm excited to see where it's going to go. I'm excited to get brand new stories, and I'm excited to get brand new canon. So I'm excited for this.
What is another thing that's so great, and this hasn't really been officially addressed yet, but there's no reason to believe, and Jennifer Hiddle, I guess, kind of hinted around to this on Twitter, but there's no reason to believe that there won't be more books added to the Legends universe at some point, but I'm going to assume that they want to get this new story making concept where you've incorporating the films and the books and the video games and comics into a new stratosphere, if you will. So let's get that going first. And Christian, you mentioned things that are so important. The fact that James Luceno is writing another book where we get to go inside a very popular villain and look at the political aspects and ramifications. We know what kind of writer he is and what he can do with that. It's going to be magical. And then you've got John Jackson Miller, who is such a great guy, such a fan favorite. Kenobi, one of my favorite Legends books, I'll say, of all time. So we've got people in place that are creating these new stories. And when you read them, they're part of the canon. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
I can think of any other storyline or genre where this is this way. This is a big deal.
It really is a big deal, and the closest thing that I think that we can compare it to is what's happening with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the way that now they're starting to produce beyond Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV shows, animated TV shows for Netflix, which will actually be a part of the continuity of the movies as well.
Yeah.
So I think just having like a holistic story strategy is really, really smart. And the other thing to consider is that unless there's something in the new canon to directly contradict what has already been established in a Legends book, for all intents and purposes, you can still consider that Legends book to be canon. I mean, the way I see it, it's like probably mostly the new canon and the new movies will affect all of the books. And there have been many that have been published since Return of the Jedi. But, if you're talking about like the Old Republic or even, Lucino's Darth Plagueis or, books set in the prequel era or even during the original trilogy, possibly. Probably a lot of those won't be as affected as much.
Probably not. And I mentioned this on our May the 4th special, but if you don't do this, if you don't take this avenue, but say, all that stuff counted, quote unquote counted, can you imagine the casual fan about to walk in episode 7 and then, here's a reading list of about 55 books that you probably should read if you want to know what's going to happen? Well, that isn't going to happen. So you have to be realistic about embracing what is for fans who are going to go no matter what. I mean, if you run a Star Wars podcast or come on a Star Wars podcast or you're the cultural editor of the BBC, you're going to be a fan. You're going to see episode 7 no matter what. But the beauty about Star Wars and the genius of Star Wars is that every generation is reintroduced and reinvented, thus guaranteeing that it's going to be important to the culture for a very long time. So this is a genius idea. And plus, you've got the story group in place with Pablo Hidalgo and Dave Filoni and on and on and on. People that know Star Wars and know it backwards and forwards and are driving this massive ship in an amazing direction.
Yeah, and Pablo Hidalgo is such an EU aficionado. I mean, he is so plugged into that universe. He is not the kind of guy who would just be on board with just dismissing all of that lightly. And because it's not being dismissed. That's the thing. I mean, if something's still from the EU can fit within the new canon and can, be a part of it, it will be there. I mean, think about the way even that way back when, in Heir to the Empire, Timothy Zahn came up with the name Coruscant for the Galactic Capital, and George Lucas, included that then in Phantom Menace and
Aayla Secura.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would venture to say that we will continue to see that as time goes on. We will continue to see echoes of the Legends universe pop up in the new canon.
So we've got, I do too. I think that's great. I think we have the right guest on, Corey.
Oh, absolutely. I like that echoes of the Legends series. That's really nice.
Well, let's look at these 4 brand new novels that are coming out. Which ones are you the most excited about, guys? Corey, let's start with you.
Oh, I'm torn because they all look fantastic, and just because I was a huge Darth Plagueis fan, I still love the book. It's a great book. I'm looking forward to Tarkin because he's not my favorite character, but yet James Lucino, his writing is just so superb, and I just hold it so high, and I'm looking really forward to that one. And getting to know Tarkin better too. Like you said, this is all canon now. This is what it's supposed to be. And then of course Luke's book, Heir to Jedi, looks great because it's first person. We haven't really read a first person Luke story, and this is canon stuff. And of course, John Jackson Miller is a fantastic writer. Oh my gosh. And then he's jumping into the Rebels universe and getting to know those characters and the backstory on them and all the adventures they're going to have. And of course, I love the cover. My favorite cover probably is Lords of the Sith. It looks fantastic. It looks really action-packed. It looks really cool looking cover. But I think the first one, if I could read it right now, I think I have to go with Heir to the Jedi. I'm going to check out Luke's story.
Christian, what about you?
I think I'd probably go with Tarkin first, just because I really do love Tarkin as a character. I think, just going back to, Peter Cushing's incredible performance in A New Hope, he just is dripping with malevolence and is the template for basically like every non-Vader, non-Palpatine Imperial villain to follow. I mean, it's like it seems like Admiral Piet and Admiral Ozzel and all those guys they're all just kind of like attempts at recapturing the magic of Tarkin in a way. And I think what he did is just what Peter Cushing did with that character was astonishing, and I love the way he came across on the Clone Wars TV series as well. I'm so glad that they included him. And Lucino is the true master of continuity in terms of the Star Wars novels. His ability to draw upon everything that's come before and that's been written before and synthesize it and weave it into his own narrative. I remember when I first read like his Agents of Chaos duology in the New Jedi Order, just like how amazing it was that he took all of the stuff from like the Brian Daley Han Solo novels and all, and just like, he had such a mastery of it. He makes the Star Wars universe feel so textured and so lived in, exactly the way George Lucas did. So I'm really excited about Tarkin. But I think what Corey said is exactly right. I mean, across the board, I would say that these covers for these books are the best we've seen in a long time.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I haven't seen a cover that's really been as eye-popping as any of these in ages. I mean, maybe Darth Plagueis, but I feel like that there haven't been that many that have really made me want to like, yeah, I've got to buy that. And like with all of these, it's like I'm going to buy these the day they come out.
Yes, if you can, in fact, judge a book by its cover, we're in for some amazing storytelling. I like what you said, Christian, about James Lucino. I think when you talk about verisimilitude in the Star Wars universe, Lucino brings it to a level that isn't really seen all that often. And that's not a knock against other authors, but he just has a way of getting inside the head of someone and making them a real character in a fictional universe.
He really does, and it's a rare quality. I mean, I think I'd probably my personal favorites were always Mike Stackpole and Aaron Alston, but I think Lucino is really right up there.
It's because of Plagueis.
Yeah, it was well done.
Astounding, and you're right. I mean, I think John Jackson Miller is great as well. Really excited to see what he's going to do to set up Rebels. Paul Kemp, really interesting. Lords of the Sith.
Yep.
That's going to be kind of an interesting read. Like Vader and Palpatine, just like together, like having to like survive on their own on a hostile planet. I mean, that's kind of interesting.
It's like a buddy cop movie.
I know.
Yeah. It's going to be a bromance.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's great. For me, it's interesting you both mentioned Lords of the Sith. That's the one I'm the least interested in, and I don't know why. I think this feels most like a Legends storyline book as far as the idea. To me, one of the things that sometimes would fall flat for me about the Legends series is sometimes I think, all right, besides getting another Star Wars book out there, why does the story need to be told? So I have faith in what Paul Kemp will do, and I'm hoping that will be something strong. Personally, when I saw the fact that we're going to get something that's a little bit before Rebels and that John Jackson Miller is doing that, and of course, from my own bias that he's such a good friend of our show, I emailed him right away and I said, we got to have you on. So he's going to come on a little closer to the book's release, and he said he's still writing and working on it. So just knowing that book is out there, it's happening. We've got that amazing cover that kind of gives us the best of the OT as far as the Stormtroopers and the Star Destroyer, TIE Fighters. We've got the Jedi. We've got Hera, the new fan favorite there. There's so many exciting things that are going to happen. That's the book that I think I'd claw my way through a wooden wall just to try to get at because it looks fantastic. And Corey, you mentioned Heir to the Jedi, first person, Luke Skywalker's point of view. That might be the most gorgeous cover. I mean, Mark Hamill, I don't think even Mark Hamill in his Corvette Summer Days look that good. And it just looks fantastic. He's got this blue lightsaber. You know it's after A New Hope. So we're going to see actual canon stuff that happens between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. That's very exciting to me.
Yeah, Heir to the Jedi fascinating. I mean, to actually get inside Luke's head, I think he's been a difficult character for some of the Legends writers to really capture over the years, to really make compelling. And if Kevin Hearn can do that, if Kevin Hearn can really make him feel real, that will be an amazing achievement. And the challenge of a character like a Luke Skywalker, and it's probably the reason why most people, fair or not, would say that they like Han Solo more, is that when you're talking about a character who's so earnest and so innately good and so pure, in a sense, it can be very hard to make that character interesting. And I think there are a few times in popular culture when characters like that have been very interesting. I mean, I think in Mark Hamill's portrayal of Luke in the movies is fantastic. I'd say like Christopher Reeve's Superman definitely is in that mold as well.
Mm-hmm. Captain America.
I was just going to say, I think Chris Evans as Captain America captures that beautifully. People do not give him enough credit for how well he pulls that off.
He takes a challenging character and makes him someone that you can empathize with as well as sympathize with, that you buy into what he's selling because he does it so beautifully.
Very much so. Very much so. It's really, really masterful what he does with that character. But I think some of the EU writers have had difficulty with Luke in that regard. So
that makes sense.
If Kevin Hearn is able to pull it off, that could be, it could be the best read of the bunch.
Well, and I think another reason why Luke is so tricky, and one of the things that it hung me up on previous Legends books at times, especially when it's post-Return of the Jedi storytelling, is if it doesn't feel like the characters from the film, then you just kind of put up a wall and say, no, this isn't my Luke. I can't buy into this. Another reason that it's hard to, I think, write Luke probably is that all the major conflicts that Luke has, we've seen already, and we know them by heart. So to take a character who's already gone over the major character arcs that he develops and to give him something new to kind of marinate on, that's a real challenge for a writer.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, it's it'll be interesting to see how it comes together. And I think the fact that it's, Kevin Hearn's debut Star Wars novel is, that's really ambitious. I mean, if he could make like the definitive literary statement about Luke here, and if he does, it could be amazing, But it's a tall order. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a given by any means that it's going to be great, but
no,
he has an opportunity for greatness, and we'll see if he lives up to that.
Much like Luke,
very much so.
Well, I will say real quick, talking about Legends, I know Timothy Zahn is a great author in that series, that era, and I know his beloved books are just that every fan just has read them and just loved them. They're fantastic, and he made a great statement on Facebook, just kind of backing everything that's been going on, and he kind of put it in perspective as far as like the old 1950s Davy Crockett TV series, and he relates it to like the historians of Davy Crockett knew one thing, but then these TV series were kind of like these wild adventures that maybe did or didn't happen. He was in one place or another place at that time, and it just reinforces, his voice in fiction and in fandom is huge. So I think for him to get behind this and celebrate it is wonderful. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I like that Zahn said that as well. I thought that was beautifully said. And again, it seems like, what is it about us Star Wars fans that when we get everything that we wanted, sometimes we're just not happy with that? What does that say about us as a culture of fandom? I've been guilty of it as well. My goodness, I could go on and on about things with the special edition.
Yeah, it's a funny thing about that. I think it's just that, not to overly pat ourselves on the back, but I think it's just that we care so much. And sometimes that maybe can prevent us from seeing the forest for the trees.
Yes.
And when I think about really how as a Trekkie as well, or a Trekker, how really well at least until Into Darkness, you know, we fans of that franchise handled the fact that if you wanted to, you could look at the 2009 film as pretty much like erasing, not just like, you know, existing in a parallel timeline like the film tries to present it, but you could, based on everything that we know about time travel, say that film like erases the previous canon. You know, and the fact that people accepted that, you know, I was proud of Star Trek fans for being able to accept that. And, you know, and I think Star Wars fans will ultimately accept these changes too. I know that there will always be some griping about, tweaking the, you know, the original films for the special editions and griping about the prequels and all, and griping about some of these things. But in the end, are these things really going to prevent people from going to see these new movies? No, of course not. Never. The fans will show up, and all that really matters is if it's a good story.
That's exactly right. We have a universe that we're so passionate about, and if the story is well told, we'll be there. We'll be seeing it many, many, many times opening weekend and beyond, and it's just opened up a whole bunch of exciting avenues for us to explore to a universe that easily could have kind of faded out after the end of the Clone Wars, and thank goodness we're going to have it for so much more. And I'm so glad. I'm so excited. What a great time to be a Star Wars fan. At the end of our interviews, we have 5 questions that we ask all of our guests to try to find some commonality, very much like Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton.
I love that. That sounds great. Yes, please hit me with them.
Okay, Christian, your favorite Star Wars movie?
I'd have to go with A New Hope. It's just a perfect entertainment in every possible way. It synthesizes like practically all of pop culture before it. Kurosawa films, Flash Gordon, comic books. It's incredible. It is a perfect object.
Well said. Very well said. Who is your favorite character?
Boss Nass. No.
That's definitely a new one.
No, it's favorite. Now, this is an interesting thing. Favorite movie character or favorite EU character or favorite character overall?
We're gonna we'll let you pick both.
Okay. Well, I would. God, I got to tell you, I mean, Tarkin is right up there for me from the original trilogy. I just think that he is such a great villain, has such really wonderful dialogue written for him. For me, he is like the gold standard of a villain beyond Vader and the Emperor. I just think Tarkin is it, really. I think he's so great. It's a funny thing because it's like after spending so many years of fandom, it's like kind of hard to just ever narrow it down to one thing for any of these categories. You know, I mean, for favorite Star Wars movie, part of me would almost want to say Revenge of the Sith as well, actually, because I adore that film. I saw it like 5 times in the theaters, and I think it's one of the best blockbusters, you know, made in the past 15 years, easily. Mm-hmm. But yeah, favorite character, I think I would have to go with Tarkin. In terms of the EU, I would go with Corran Horn from the X-Wing novels by Mike Stackpole. There was just a level of realism to that character that I think was unique in Star Wars, and those books for me really showed how, you know what, you could tell amazing stories without any of the characters from the films. That you could just create wholly new characters and explore different aspects of that galaxy far, far away that we had never seen before. So Corran Horn would be right up there.
Favorite line of dialogue or film moment?
My favorite moment in the films, by far, it goes back to Tarkin again. It's the conference room scene in A New Hope. I think this is so fantastic. It occurs about 40 minutes in, but it's when we meet Tarkin for the first time, and he and Vader come into the conference room on board the Death Star with the whole congregation of admirals and generals, and actually Admiral Yularen from the Clone Wars is sitting there, and of course that's when we first see Vader force choke Admiral Mati, who is just so great. And Admiral Mati is just such a... Actually, I could have mentioned him as a favorite character as well, because I love that guy. He's just so snotty. Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. I love that. That would be my favorite scene. And also, I just love it in terms of where it fits in the narrative, because that's really the first, other than Luke having his heart-to-heart with Obi-Wan, that's really like the first exposition scene in the movie. I mean, A New Hope just like hits the ground running. It drops you into it, in medias res so brilliantly that it's like you just are kind of like left to fend for yourself to figure out what's going on. And then that conference room scene slows it down and gives you all this backstory about, there's an emperor and there's, an imperial senate and it's just been dissolved. And you really start to learn all this stuff about the politics of that world. And I think it's amazing.
So if you collect, what is your favorite collectible that you own?
I have a Darth Vader, I guess you would say piggy bank, but it's really just a bank that I got around the time of the special editions that where you can like put a coin in it, and then the Darth Vader, then the Imperial March plays.
Nice.
And
Cool.
Darth Vader's lightsaber, he raises his lightsaber and it glows red. And there's his brilliant line of dialogue from The Empire Strikes Back that we hear in James Earl Jones' voice, like, impressive, most impressive, but you are not a Jedi yet. and so I would listen to that like 20 times a day when I was a kid. And I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Okay, last question here. What particular messages or themes about the Star Wars saga resonate or speak to you?
Oh, on so many levels. I think it is the quintessential coming of age story. It's so universal in the way that we see Luke leave the farm, leave his farm boy upbringing behind, and have to embrace a larger universe that he barely even knew existed, and ultimately succeed and thrive within that larger universe. It's a metaphor for the way that all of us have to grow up, and the way that all of us have our, more or less, some kind of usually sheltered existence when we're children or teenagers. And then there comes a point where we have to seize our destiny. We have to seize responsibility for our lives. And we realize that we're the ones who have to be the architects of our lives and how our destiny will ultimately turn out. I think there's just something so powerful and profound about it. And I really see in Star Wars, especially in New Hope, as being kind of like it really is of a piece with Lucas's American Graffiti as well, because like that film is all about making the choice to leave one small town and go out into the world, or do you stay behind and stay at your high school, and do you stay at home? And Star Wars for me is almost like kind of what happens after the Richard Dreyfuss character makes his decision to leave in American Graffiti. It's like, well, when you have left home, what do you do then? And basically, that's the big question mark of life. So, Star Wars, I think, is extremely profound. It's not just a popcorn entertainment. It is a mythological condensation of life itself.
Wow, that may be the most well said of that question we've ever had. So beautifully done. I love the comparison to American Graffiti. I never thought about it like that. So thank you so much. That's fantastic.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and these are great questions. So that went a long way. If you like the answer, I mean, really great questions. I love that you have kind of a James Lipton thing going on here. That's really fun.
And Christian, before we let you go, where can our listeners get in touch with you and share their thoughts with you on everything Star Wars and anything involving pop culture, really?
Absolutely. You guys can reach out, message me at any time on Twitter. I can be found at the handle at CT Blauvelt. That's CTBLAUVELT. I riff all the time on pop culture, certainly a lot of Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, but really just like movies in general. I'm a big classic movie fan, foreign film fan. I basically, you'll find me talking about everything, classic rock, whatever.
Awesome.
and also, please feel free to check out my website. I'm deputy culture editor at bbc.com. The actual site that I manage is bbc.com/culture. And we cover film, art, pop and classical music, fashion, books. Today we published a really fun Star Wars article that I wrote myself, sort of jumping off the news about the Episode 7 cast announcement, in which I rounded up all the old screen tests of Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher from the mid-'70s when they were first trying out to be on Star Wars. It's kind of like, we're so excited that they are returning, but here's how it all began. Here's when they first started. So we definitely cover some Star Wars on BBC Culture as well. So please, guys, check it out.
That's awesome.
Christian Blauvelt, what an honor it has been for us to have a cup of coffee with you at late notice to talk about these amazing things going on in the Star Wars universe. It's been such a long time coming to talk about these things. Finally, we have concrete news that we can share with the listeners and interact with, and you certainly brought your A game, Christian. So we're so happy to have shared this with you, and we look forward to having you on in the future.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you inviting me on, and anytime.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
I'd love to come back.
Now that we heard from Christian Blauvelt in New York City, let's travel a little bit around the world here, stopping in the UK and Australia. We got a chance to sit down with Mark Newbold from Jedi News UK and Ed Dahlster from the IndieCast and get their opinions about the EU changing over the New Legends line. Okay, gentlemen, I just want to get your opinion here as far as this news. How does this impact you as fans, and how does this impact the Star Wars community and the EU? Ed, why don't you start us off?
I'm a big reader of the Star Wars EU. I did stop during that last, it felt like 27 books of the, I can't even remember what the last series was. I'm reading Scoundrels at the moment. I've been reading since, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and I really enjoy them. But I can understand that they're putting that into a legacy series. I mean, for the most part, with the moviegoers, they don't read the books. They're not going to know why is Chewbacca not here? Oh, because a planet fell on him. When did that happen? I didn't see that in the movie. Yeah. So, you can understand why they would go this route. And I don't think they're like negating all those books that were prior, they're still there. They still exist. You can still enjoy them. You can still take those characters. So I think it's fairly understandable why they did it. I can understand why people would be upset because they've, they love the characters. Does that mean Mara Jade's definitely not going to turn up in a series or elements of like that? I'm sure they will put some nods in. I mean, Marvel does it. The DC movies do it where they, nod to comics that have gone before and things like that, but it's not unexpected, I don't think so. That's my thoughts.
Mark.
Yeah, it's pretty much nailed it. It's all still there. Nothing really changes. I mean, if Star Wars, it's a big galaxy, and there's a lot of ways to get into it. And for older people, who watched it when it came out in '77, that was our exit or entrance to Star Wars. A lot of people recently have come into Star Wars via the EU. A lot of kids under the age of 10 came through the Clone Wars. So there's lots of entry points to Star Wars. But the thing I would say that made this decision make more sense is that, Disney have got plans to keep Star Wars going for at least another sort of 25, 30 years. And if it hits and really goes well, there's no reason to think it won't go any longer. So, and they're doing episode 789, which nobody ever anticipated when the EU blossomed the way it did. So there's a lot of random variables that sort of come into play. So to do this now is the right time. And I've got to say that the video and the announcement on StarWars.com given that the fans, EU fans especially, are so voracious and so passionate about it, I think it was very well handled, kind of really, really well handled and nicely said, and involving Timothy Zahn, who's kind of an influential, important person in that realm, was a smart move, if you want to call it that, a smart move. It was a nice way of doing it. So I love continuity. I like things to all link up. I think Leland Cheat is the bee's knees, and I think the job he does is amazing, and I kind of feel a little bit for all the guys that have spent years and years compiling timelines and chronologies and such and pulling it all together. But nevertheless, it is what it is. We've got 7, 8, and 9 coming, and that's more important than anything. So to do this and to call it Legends as well, I think there's a nice ring, and yeah.
Yeah, it's none of it's going away. None of it's disappearing into the ether. And the video was, like you said, a very loving, reverential tribute. And they clearly said, look, this is a minefield here. If we want to take stuff from it, we can. To have to be beholden to something like that is not realistic or plausible. And it gives the creative geniuses the reins to go any direction they want to. So it's exciting. And those things, again, are still there. People are lamenting that the EU is gone, or there are these jokes about people burning their EU books. The Nazis didn't invade Star Wars, people. There's no reason to have to worry about that kind of thing. It's also there, as Mark said, it was never canon. It's never been canon. It's always been incredibly fun and engaging, and that has not changed, nor will it ever. And also, as people have pointed out on Twitter, there's no reason to believe that there will never be any books in the Legends series in the future. It's just right now, I'm sure they're trying to cement this new course that they have envisioned.
Yeah.
The only big disappointment is that, does that mean that Jackson might not appear in episode 7?
Well, he's still out there. You never know.
As long as Hoojibs are in there, I'm happy.
That's right.
I did love that little record, Planet of the Hoojibs. That was
I did too. That was awesome. Did you write about that in the blog, Mark?
I did, yeah. Cliff was my hero. Nearly had him as a tattoo. Very close.
Wow.
Maybe by Celebration Anaheim, that tattoo will come to fruition.
Come to haunt me.
All right, well, guys, we'll let you go. We know it's either very early or very late, so...
Yeah. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
It's such a pleasure.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
No, thank you guys.
With all the other news, we certainly had a lot of news planned to talk about, and then StarWars.com gave us all these amazing gifts. So some of the things we were going to talk about we'll save for our next show, but we do want to say we're offering this exciting opportunity. It's exciting to us because we love to talk with all of our Star Wars fans and listeners, and so we'd like to give one listener an opportunity to podcast with us. And what we're doing because we're going to be reviewing the Lost Missions of the Clone Wars this summer, like we've been talking about. And we finally decided on an actual name. It's going to be called A Cup of Clone Wars. And what you need to do is what, Corey, so they can try to sign up to win?
Sure, Dan. All you have to do to enter to win is go onto iTunes and just review our show real quick and with the hashtag Clone Wars, and we'll see that. Those will go into a random drawing in the upcoming weeks. We'll pick somebody to help us co-host a Star Wars Clone Wars podcast over the summer. We're looking forward to picking a winner.
And now, your Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio.
Here's another Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio with me, Rob Wainfur. Coming up on today's show, we got some Spielberg news, Goonies 2 news, but first, E.T., the video game.
It's the video game that lets you pretend you're E.T., running away from secret agents, falling into danger, finding a phone to call home, and discovering the best thing on earth, a friend. E.T., only from Atari.
Now, regarded as one of the worst games in the history of video games, E.T. the Extraterrestrial by Atari was so bad and flopped equally as bad in the early 80s that urban legend has it that the distributors rounded up the unsold games, of which there were quite a few, and buried them in a landfill somewhere in New Mexico. Now, you may have heard there's a documentary being made for Microsoft Xbox detailing the history of video games, and they've commissioned a team to go looking for these games. Now, yesterday, some pictures were tweeted on Twitter of the team finally coming across some of the games that have been buried, and some of the games were actually still shrink wrapped. So it looks like that the stories are true. Now, personally myself, I played E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and I think they should stay buried. The game really is that bad. Now, according to the Hollywood Reporter, Steven Spielberg is officially attached to direct an adaptation of Roald Dahl's famous and much-loved children's book, The BFG. Now, this will be for DreamWorks. We reported way back in 2011 that DreamWorks had acquired the rights to the book. But at the time, it wasn't thought that Spielberg would be directing, but now that seems to have changed. Now, we reported in the last show that Spielberg is attached to direct the kidnapping of Edgardo Mortara, but it's also rumoured that he's on board for an entitled Cold War project written by Matt Charman, and which will have Tom Hanks in it as well. But we're still hoping out as well that Robopocalypse is still on the cards, and we'll keep you posted on all the latest on Steven Spielberg, as he's going to be busy over the next few months. Now, the University of Southern California announced on Friday, the 25th of April, that Spielberg is to launch an establishment of a centre for advanced genocide research. Now, the main goal will be for the centre to research conditions that lead to genocide and maybe in the future avoid such tragedies, persecutions and human loss. Spielberg established the Shaw Foundation 20 years ago, following the release of the Oscar-winning movie Schindler's List. Now, the foundation has made tremendous progress during its 20 years, and as Spielberg says, the Institute has collected and indexed nearly 52,000 testimonies and established educational programs such as eyewitness and teachings, with testimony that brings people who experienced history into classrooms around the world. Now comes the next significant chapter, Spielberg said, one that establishes the Institute as one of the leading academic centres of excellence for the study of the Holocaust and genocides. The potential is there for groundbreaking research. Now, recently, TMZ website caught up with director of The Goonies, Richard Donner, and asked him if a sequel is in the works, of which he said yes. Now, the entertainment website caught up with the director again recently and asked him some more questions about whether a Goonies sequel is in the works. And Richard Donner's reply was that Steven Spielberg is involved in the project. Now, I'm not sure whether Richard Donner is actually just pulling everyone's leg or whether there is some actual truth to it. So here's the video clip itself for you to decide for yourself whether you think Richard Donner is actually being serious or not.
We're going to get this done.
Gotcha.
Period. It's Steven. Look, Steven came up with the idea of doing a sequel after 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, it was his idea.
Oh, yeah. You don't do it without him.
Yeah.
You know, we've been trying for a while. And then he came up with another storyline, and he's right on.
I mean, do you think Josh Brolin or any of those people are going to actually come back in a...
God knows. It's up to them. If they have any sense, they will. If they don't, they won't.
Well, that wraps up another Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio. Thanks for listening. Just before I go, just want to make you aware of a brand new podcast called Movie Night Carlo. The very first episode, they talk about Jaws. They've got the director of the Shark Is Still Working documentary on there. And I'm on there as well, giving you my insight and my memories of what I think is one of the most perfect movies ever made, Jaws by Steven Spielberg. Also, very quickly, Alan Ladd Jr.'s daughter has just started a Kickstarter campaign where she's hoping to make a documentary on her father. You can check out all the details about this and the documentary at laddiemovie.com. Well, that's it from me. Thanks for listening. Make sure you check us out on Facebook and Twitter, The Bearded Trio, and the main website as well, thebeardedtrio.com. Thanks for listening. I'll hand you back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
I must be allowed to speak.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
Our topic for show number 18 is The Empire Strikes Back. Scott Murray of the Assembly of Geeks returns to help us look at Episode 5 as we continue our series with Scott looking at the 6 existing Star Wars films in reverse order. What are some of the most important or significant themes in this popular entry in the original trilogy? What aspects of this film resonate with fans, and how does the film stand up to the test of time? Welcome, Scott.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me back. Always good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Well, we're glad that Gannon could part with you for a little bit and have you join us.
Yes.
So that's
I'm
great.
allowed out every once in a while.
Well, let's just get into it. And we were just talking about this before we started taping, and a fun fact that a lot of people don't know is that we're going to have very different opinions on The Empire Strikes Back, which you don't often find with such a popular film. But I'll just open it up to our esteemed guest, Scott. Why is this film so beloved by fans still?
Because it's dark.
Explain that.
Well, I mean, it's so it's so counter to what we saw, especially around that time. Where literally at the end of the day, the bad guys win, and I think bad guy characters sometimes are just as popular as the good guys, if not more so. Sometimes I think of all the villains like in Batman and things of that nature. So I think there's that, and I think about just the importance of Darth Vader telling Luke Skywalker that he's his father. I think of story expert Robert McKee talking about that literally being one of the greatest, if not the greatest, kind of twist or component to a story of all time. Just because, they first and foremost, they did such a great job not letting that leak out. I mean, very few people in the cast even knew about that.
Right.
So I think as far as childhood is concerned, people remember their heads exploding when that happened. And it was just such a good turn of events after being introduced to all these characters in 1977. And when that happened, obviously the thing that we all remember is sci-fi wasn't big at the time. That very first scene in A New Hope, just grabs our attention and we're mesmerized for the whole rest of the film. And then I think about how at the beginning of Empire, we just realized in 1983 that this awesome thing is continuing because they land on this planet full of snow and you realize just the imagination of this universe just continues to expand and you're in awe by it, and we get the AT-ATs and everything like that. So I just think that there are a lot of good memories involved in it, and there are some really cool things that happen by beloved characters on both the light side and the dark side.
Corey, what about you? How does this film? Why does it hit you as being so beloved?
Well, it's even like you guys said in pop culture. It's just like one of those movies everybody just goes to. They always remember that. And of course, if you're a Star Wars fan, that's usually everybody's favorite is Empire. It's just because, like you said, the twist is so keen and so kind of hits you in the face as you don't expect it. And it's like you said, we grew up with these characters. The first movie was so huge, and then to be able to expand on that and just make it better. Usually sequels aren't as good as the originals, and this one was just like, we already know the characters. Here we go again, and like you said, Scott, it was kind of like in the first movie we were on this dry Tatooine desert, and the second movie is this cold, dark, wintry planet, and we're introduced to our characters again. But also, the first 5 to 10 minutes is, we almost lose Luke, and it's just, we don't know what's going to happen. It's thing after thing is they're always on the run. The rail's always run. It's always bad. All these bad things are happening. You think something good's going to happen, and all things bad things are going to happen. I think people like to have that. They're not sure what's going to happen. It's going to be a surprise that everything goes along with it. But then again, it's the characters that just suck us in, and they're just beloved by everybody, and just to see them grow and see them just come together as friends, and also just be introduced to new characters that are charming and wonderful in new places. It's an expanse of just our imagination. I think that's why we love it so much.
And this is the first film really that showed us that you can take a story that you love, and how many times did we all see A New Hope before Empire came out? For me, a staggering amount of times. I had it on beta, for crying out loud. So it was something I watched so much, and then to know there were new adventures, that this culture of heroism in this new genre, really to my eyes, just blew me away. That there was so many more layers to go on, and you mentioned, Scott, the idea of the fact that it's dark, and it is darker. And now it seems like every single time there's a sequel, you can just about guarantee that someone's going to say, "Oh, this is the Empire Strikes Back of the series." Yeah, I would say 99% of the time I want to say, "No, it actually isn't." And there are a lot of reasons why The Empire Strikes Back is such a powerful film and phenomenon. Of course, father and son, which we'll get to a little bit later. But you've got these themes of death here. Everything is, you've got cold at the beginning. You've got Han Solo cold. You've got Luke on Dagobah saying, I feel cold, death, when he goes into the tree. Death is a very popular, prevalent theme in this because in the hero's journey, you know, there's death and then there's resurrection. You come back stronger, which is clearly what Luke does in Return of the Jedi. So you've got that going on. You've got the AT-AT. You've got the introduction of Yoda, who now I don't know if that would work as well because everyone would know or have a pretty good idea who Yoda was or see images of him. When we first saw Yoda bothering Luke and R2 on Dagobah, we thought he was just some annoying little green guy.
Yeah.
No concept of how powerful he was going to be, how important he was. And then at the end, you truly had to wait 3 years to see what was going to happen to Han Solo, and that ripped your heart out. Every single time we'd go back to see The Empire Strikes Back in theaters, my brother, who was 2.5 years younger than me, would always say the same thing. Are they going to rescue Han Solo? Is this the one they get Han Solo out? And I would say, no, it's the same movie. So it's so powerful. There's so many surprises and twists. Truly a cliffhanger ending. It actually has an ending, but more on that later. So I covered the important themes. I've written down a few here, and I'm just going to tell it to the listeners too. And listeners, feel free to shout at the radio, and maybe we'll shout back. That might be kind of crazy. But I've got the tree, father and son, Lando, and Yoda. Those are the themes that kind of jumped out at me. Let's go ahead and take the tree first, Corey. What does the tree mean to you on Dagobah? How important is that?
I remember watching that scene when I was a kid, and I always thought it was kind of a dream state Luke was in. And obviously it is somewhat, but as I got older and watching that, I just kind of pieced it together and picked it apart and realized that like he has to face his fear and face himself from turning to the dark side. And I didn't know that when I was a kid watching it, and just thought it was just a really creepy scene. It's just that weird looking Luke face out of the Darth Vader mask, and you're like, it was weird, and it's an interesting scene because it's a big revelation for Luke, I think, as his Jedi training goes along, and for him to be able to realize that, I think it's a crux on his development as a character. As far as he has to realize what he truly has to become, what he truly has to do in order to become a Jedi, and in order to save the rebellion and defeat the Empire.
Scott, what about you?
Well, I mean, if, looking at it now, I kind of think of the nerdy version of Eddie Murphy and both saying, "Oh, this is the artistic portion of the film," because in a way it is. Because it's a big symbolic scene that's basically telling Luke, this could be you if you're not disciplined. But like Corey was saying, as a kid, I totally didn't understand what was happening there. I was 7, so I was like, huh? The thing that was that made it even more confusing for me as a kid was going into Empire. The thing that was important to me, being the Luke Skywalker person that I am, it meant everything to me for Luke to prove that he was going to be this, awesome Jedi that we all thought he could be. And I loved the idea, even though it was as premature as it might have been in Empire, that he wasn't afraid to just step to Darth Vader and go, I don't care who you are, I'll fight you. And to have that moment when I first saw it, I thought I was ready for him to fight Darth Vader, even though part of my brain was going, why is Darth Vader on Dagobah?
And you think, oh my gosh.
And then to see that it was nothing but symbolism, I was like, oh darn, I really, not that I thought that, that he had killed Darth Vader in 5 seconds and the movie was over, but it was a little confusing as a kid, but really more than anything, it just stands as a symbolism of, this could be you. That you could be the next Darth Vader if you're not careful. Right. The only thing that I've wondered as a fan later is just, how it all came to be. Yoda tells him, go in there but you won't need your weapons. And then when I see what happens, it's like, really? Yeah. Does that mean if he'd gone in there without his weapons, something different would have happened? I've often wondered what Yoda knew about what was going to happen when he went in there versus what really happened.
Well, and I won't go too much into this, but they do address this in the Yoda arc in season 6 of of the Clone Wars. Did either of you get a chance to see that yet?
I have not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I won't address that. We're just gonna deal with what we have on celluloid. And when I first saw that scene and Vader's masks explode and you see Mark Hamill's face, and I looked at my mom and I said, and everyone in the theater gasped, and I said, who is that? And she said, that's Luke. And I thought, that's Luke. Luke isn't Darth Vader. And I just turned off my brain and and I wanted to see what was going to happen. Then you look at it through an adult lens, and I started thinking about this, and we talked about this with Paul McDonald a few weeks ago. But scripturally, there's a passage that says, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So Yoda says, what's in there, only what you take with you. Right. I do believe that if Luke walks in there without his lightsaber and his blaster, that there is no Vader. I do believe that. And I can't really give you any factual evidence to back that up. But I will say Luke brings in aggression. Luke brings in fear. And that's what he is met with. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for him. It's an impetuous reaction to something that could be just meditative and contemplative. And then he meets Vader and he kills him. And of course, we see what happens there. And then he comes out and he's confused. He's afraid. That leads to the end of the film. So it's a beautiful foreshadowing. It's certainly the artistic portion of the film. But it just opens up all these possibilities. That this is a world that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface, literally beneath the roots, the trees. The tree is dead. And he finds death in there. He finds Darth Vader, who at that point is very much dead inside. And I think that's something that I like about Empire, is it's the most intimate of the three films as far as more of a personal journey. A New Hope, there are some personal journeys. Jedi, there's certainly some personal journeys. But we're talking about on a galactic scale. But it's in Empire, we're just more about one-on-one character time. And I think that even though it's the darkest, I think there's the most emotional connectivity there as well. All right, well, let's go in and talk about father and son. Scott, you had mentioned earlier the magnitude of that, and it still holds true today.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was a game changer for me as a kid. Did you
believe it? You guys believe it right away when you heard it? Because I didn't. I remember thinking that Darth Vader was lying, and I didn't even think twice about it. And then years later, somebody showed me the book and says, "Look, it's all in bold. It's got to be true." I don't know.
I mean, I guess for me, I just figured that by the time we got around to seeing Return of the Jedi, we would just know more about it. And
you're much wiser than I was at that age.
And then he does, and then they speak to one another too at the end, and call each other father and son.
Mm-hmm.
But it was good to get a little more depth to that by the time Jedi came around. But I knew that immediately that made a huge conflict in my head because, like I said, the fight scene in Empire was a big deal to me as a kid because, like I said, I really wanted Luke to prove to Vader that he wasn't afraid of him and he would step up to him and fight him and all that sort of thing. And then once Vader threw that out, I was like, oh, crap, well, this complicates things. And I struggled with that through Jedi. I was like, how can we beat this guy but without him having to kill his father? I mean, it created a really great conflict, as they say, at the end of Empire rolling into the beginning of Jedi, because among other things, I was wondering, as I anticipated Jedi coming out, how that was going to even get resolved.
Yeah, I think that fight scene between Vader and Luke, like we said before in the show, it's the way it's shot and the way the lighting is and everything it's just ominous. It's one of the best cinematic scenes in film history, I believe. There's the shapes and their figures, and then of course, going in as a viewer watching it, you're thinking, okay, Luke's going to take this guy down, and he struggles a little bit in the beginning, and all of a sudden he kind of shows his power off a little bit, and Vader's like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that. And then they're fighting, and Luke's kind of winning, you're like going, oh, this is awesome, cool, and all of a sudden he just gets barraged and just destroyed by Vader, and then all of a sudden his hand gets cut off. You're going, this can go nowhere else good. Then all of a sudden he says, I'm your father, and you're like going, wait, what? I mean, I don't remember my original reaction to it very well, but I remember watching it with my kids. And my two boys, my oldest turned to me and said, wait a minute, that's his dad? And his his face just like is in awe. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you don't realize, like we were saying, that that turn of that twist in the story is so beloved by fans and so huge, even in storytelling nowadays. It's like you can't top it. Because like we said, it's built up so far with these characters and the reveal there, and of course it becomes so. Like you said, Dan, it's so intimate. It's father and son, and what a relationship there that most people have with them. They're probably sitting in theaters with their father and son right next to each other and thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's just the ramifications of that. It's just blows your mind." And I think it's one of those scenes and one of those phrases that will forever live, just on and on and on. We'll always remember it, and it's just one of those things that just kind of strikes you to your core as a Star Wars fan too. You'll just never forget it. And people wearing like, Empire Strike Back T-shirts, and they have that scene, and it's just like you just see that hand coming out, and there's such a essence about that just blows you away.
And is it one of those things where you guys? Did you guys, did you take it a step further and think, what if that were me, and what if my dad was Darth Vader and I had to deal with it?
Yeah, sure.
Going through my mind.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people like Empire. The father and son dynamic is such an important part in any real relationship psychologically and from your growth. And yeah, those struggles that people have with their fathers or relating to them. You're talking about the most important male role model in your life. And I think now that I'm older and I can look back on it, since I didn't have the strongest relationship with my father growing up, I think that's one of the things that I gravitated towards that particular scene. And even anything with that, like you were talking about before, Corey, I'm pointing at the computer like you can actually tell who I'm pointing at. It just, when he walks up and it says, "The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you're not a Jedi yet," and they're just standing there with each other, and the lightsaber's ignited, and Vader's only using one hand, and that is my favorite scene in all of cinema. It just, and there's no music. John Williams punctuates that scene by not putting any music at all and just letting it stand for itself.
Yeah, the other thing that I think about too that might have not been, obviously completely obvious, if I can be repetitive there. Obviously not completely obvious, is the fact that, if you were looking, I guess of course we were all kids, but if you were looking for, some other evidence, perhaps evidence to whether that's true, and this is this is even taken to another level and addressed further in Jedi, is that Vader, there's so many times where Vader could have destroyed him, killed him, and didn't. Mm-hmm, and there was a reason for that. And, Luke even says in Jedi, you couldn't bring yourself to kill me before, and I don't think you're going to do it now. And I think that, as I grew older and started to see the depth of what was happening here, was even more fascinating to me as far as the father and son relationship was concerned. Just the whole idea that there's that small element of good that was still in Anakin, because, despite the fact that he brought him to the Empire, brought him to the Emperor and did everything he was supposed to do, and still had every intention of trying to pretty much turn him, he could never, do the worst thing to his own son. And that was evident even in Empire, because, how hard would it have been to, finish Luke off after he cut his hand off? But there was a reason why he didn't do it.
Yeah, I think at first it was sort of a game of cat and mouse, and then Vader lets his guard down a little bit, rather violently, of course. And then we start to see that the human side of him, which we hadn't really seen till that point.
Yeah. Also, I think, like you said, Scott, it was, if you think about the father-son dynamic there, and you think, oh, Luke, that impacts Luke so much, but then reverse it. How does that impact Vader? Him saying those words and actually feeling that moment. We always look at Luke and how that impacts him as a character, but Vader revealing that and exposing himself that much to Luke, that's huge, I think, for Vader too.
It is. And not only do we have that big reveal, but then we get a cliffhanger ending to the film where there's so many threads left dangling in the air. And I know that Joss Whedon famously commented on the ending of The Empire Strikes Back, saying that it had no actual resolution. I certainly know how I feel about that, and Corey, you're a writer. What is there a resolution to The Empire Strikes Back?
Is there a resolution? As a film, it does end on a note where it's like
ambiguity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost, you think about it, that's a huge risk that the filmmakers and the storytellers are taking as far as this franchise, it's like, let's just kind of leave on a weird note where it's like, we're not sure what's going to happen next. Han Solo's been carried off and he's in case in carbonite. We may not see him again. Luke and Leia are hurt and wounded and moving on. And it zooms out and when they're looking out into the space there, and it's just like, wait, so what now? It's like the ending of Inception a little bit. It kind of keeps you thinking. But I think that they knew they were going to make a next film, but as a storyteller ending, it was a risk. I think in the end,
you think it has an ending, right?
I think that's an ending. It is an ending to an arc. If you think about it, everything is kind of an arc, and it's like, yes, that was the end of an arc. So the next film or the next storyline is going to come up is going to be like, okay, now where are we going to go from here? So it did end, and it was a dramatic and it was a cliffhanger ending, but it was an end because, like we said, Luke encountered the tree and grew as a Jedi and trained as a Jedi, and then he gets the revelation of Vader being his father. So all these things are coming out, and all these things, these storylines are coming out and impacting these characters, and they're growing and moving and changing. So now Luke understands what he has to do.
And Scott, you talked about this on Assembly of Geeks. I remember when the story came out, but how do you feel about it still, his comments?
Well, I think it depends on what we mean by resolution. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the problem.
It could be. And for my money, resolution is the resolving of all the conflicts that in the story.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's the classic literary definition.
Empire's the middle act. It's if it was a play, you would have the you would have the luxury of being able to stay in a theater to see the third act, whereas in a film you have to wait 3 years to see it. So that's why it ends the way it ends,
or 8 years if it's a Superman movie.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because it's not anticlimactic.
No.
It ends because that's the story that particular episode had to tell. Granted, we all want to know, holy crap, how are they going to get Han Solo? But to me, it's no different from the end of Star Trek II, where they think, holy crap, what are they going to do without Spock? Mm-hmm. And then we know they're going to make the third one and they're going to go get him. So, Luke started his training. He fought Darth Vader and lived. They managed to get out of Cloud City. And before it ends, they said, okay, we're going to go get Han. So, as leaving the movie theater, I know that third movie is going to pick up where that left off. So I didn't feel robbed of it because it's not a standalone film. It's the second act. So right. It is a resolution. Do you look for resolution in the second act? I don't know what you do unless we're talking about different forms of resolution. But
sure, and
I think they addressed plenty by the end of that film.
Oh, I did too. All of the characters' particular arcs in those films do end, maybe not to the satisfaction of the audience. And clearly, Joss Whedon, he's the master storyteller, not us. He's the one that makes millions of dollars on everything that he's done. And I'm a gigantic Joss Whedon fan, as I know that we all are.
Yeah.
But I think that this is the middle act. It's still a movie that stands on its own. We're not talking about, I'm going to get on my horse here, we're not talking about the Hunger Games books, which do not have endings, and there are no conflicts in those books that are resolved by the end. You have to wait to see what happens in the second book, in the third book. And then people, when I say that to my students, they say, okay, well, what about Lord of the Rings? Well, Lord of the Rings truly was written as one giant book, and then the editors, the publishers, split it up into 3. Okay, so that, I don't think that argument can fit here. There are 7 Harry Potter books. I know, Scott, you're not a huge Harry Potter guy per se as far as the books, but each one of those books has a beginning, middle, end, and end, and it ties into the next book. But you don't need the next book. You still have a complete story. At the end of The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo is frozen, so that is left in the air to see what happens to him as far as his fate. But at the end, he becomes selfless, and he loves, right, someone besides himself, and then he's frozen. Princess Leia, again, she thought about other people, but finally at the end she starts thinking about herself a little bit. So she's changed. Luke at the beginning is impetuous and runs off into battle and is ready to prove himself as the baddest Jedi that ever lived. And then he realizes, I got to take a step back here. There's family implications. There's more to this universe than I realized. He's changed too. So they've all changed. And Lando literally changes into Han Solo's wardrobe. So you've got actual change there. Is it the most satisfying ending? No. But that's by design. It has an ending. I can the cliffhanger ending, the Whedon's comments, I can see that. But I think ultimately, I think someone got a little too big for their britches and started deciding to put their mark on the most popular sequel in modern history.
Well, the only thing I would add is I'd like to know how he would end it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Maybe so what do you do instead for Empire? How does Empire end if it doesn't end that way? And if you tie up so many loose ends, are you hurting the anticipation or the audience anticipation for 3? Because I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's getting everybody back for the 3rd film, and we all wanted to know how are they going to rescue Han,
right?
And it was awesome. And I was talking to my wife about this earlier, who, by the way, Empire is not one of her favorite films because of what they did to Han Solo.
Fair enough.
Being and for different reasons, maybe from the guys, but I was saying how I love how it sets everything up for Jedi, and you can tell that Luke and Lando at the end of Empire have a plan already of how they're going to go get him, and how we see that in the beginning of Jedi, ranging from Lando working his way into Jabba's palace as a kind of a skiff guard, and that Princess Leia's the bounty hunter, and Chewbacca gets captured on purpose, and then Luke pretends to give C-3PO and R2-D2 to him, and how they had this really good plan, and we see it all unfold. So it does its job, and it made that beginning of Jedi even better because of it.
True. Well, speaking of better, I think the Star Wars saga is better and richer because Yoda is in it. What kind of character is Yoda for you two, and how much does he add to the saga? Because there are still some people that have a problem with Yoda or just don't embrace him, and that's fine. Different strokes for different folks. But Yoda is pretty integral to everything.
Yeah, he is. I'll go ahead real quick. Yoda, to me, when I first saw him, he was, like you said, Luke crash lands on Dagobah there, and he meets this crazy looking creature, and he's talking funny, and you're like going, oh, here's some comedic act that's going to be some goofy little character, and then all of a sudden, he's kind of eating dinner with him, and all of a sudden he like switches to this super serious guy. You're going, whoa, wait a minute, talk about another surprise. It's something you don't expect, and I think it's what Star Wars just tends to do. You don't expect the little guy to be the all-powerful master and the teacher. And then, of course, he's got quotable phrases that everybody knows, try, or do or do not, there is no try, things like that. And it's just like so quotable, but also it just gets your attention too as a viewer. It's like, oh wow, this is really intricate. And then also just going into the production side of it, it's like Yoda himself as a puppet, and the way that was designed and the way that was done was really groundbreaking. Exactly.
Well, I agree with all of that, and I would say that behind the scenes, Yoda's awesome because he's voiced by the great Frank Oz.
Oh yeah,
I knew you were going to say that, and yes, absolutely. The melding of two geniuses together, George Lucas and Jim Henson.
Yeah. I don't know how you don't like Yoda, and I think the groundbreaking point is a really good one because he was so lifelike. You kind of know he's that you've got somebody like Frank Oz pulling the strings there, but it never crosses your mind when you're looking at it. You believe exactly what you're looking at, which nowadays is nothing, but in 1980 that's really big.
Right. It's huge. Yeah. And for a puppet to have that emotional gravitas.
Well, yeah, that's just it. You're creating that character, and his level of importance is huge. You don't pull off that character right, it could ruin everything. Mm-hmm. So, I'm a huge Yoda fan. My little dog named Kenobi has a T-shirt that says "Size matters not." So there's another one of those great phrases. And I remember all the anticipation that we had when clones came out, getting to see Yoda fight with a lightsaber for the first time.
Right.
So, I mean, he's arguably, one of the biggest faces of the franchise, and I think that's undeniable.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I remember when I was younger, the whole idea, I was at my friend's house, and his dad always wanted to fast forward over the Yoda scenes because they were boring. And I remember thinking, what? You can't fast. It would be like skipping a chapter in a book when you're reading it. Yeah. But those are some of the wisest, most thought-provoking moments, which I think is one of the reasons why Empire is such an effective film, because, again, it takes you to other places psychologically, and you introduce yourself to multidimensional thinking and looking at things in different ways. The classic, we mentioned Tolkien earlier, even the smallest person can make a difference. Yoda's able to take the X-Wing and raise it out of the swamp at Dagobah with a little more than a thought, and you can tell he's a little bit exhausted because he's 900 years old. But he does something that the young, impetuous Luke Skywalker, the New Hope, that he isn't able to accomplish. But suddenly now everyone is questioning who the New Hope is. Yes, there is another. And it seemed pretty, when you're a kid, at least I always thought, it must be Han Solo, right? But then you realize it's Princess Leia. And now there's some new thoughts out there that maybe Princess Leia isn't the New Hope, which I think is revisionist history personally, because for 30 years it was certainly Princess Leia. But do you think that leads to anything else? Yeah, well, I've heard a lot of people say online, maybe Leia, and he says, no, there is another. Maybe Leia isn't the other Jedi that is the possible.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I think she is.
Yeah,
I do too.
I think she is. I don't see what else. Who else would be? Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. Those real quick.
Kenobi's got a grandson's niece or something.
No, that's not it. The other interesting part of that, Dan, when Yoda says, "Wait, there is another," it was interesting. It shows Yoda's faith in Luke, like saying, "Well, he might fail." It's interesting.
That would be a lack of faith.
A lack of faith. Yeah, it's interesting too, because like Luke is kind of
Did Yoda lie to Luke?
No, I don't think so.
I don't.
I guess the only other thing that might raise an eyebrow is, Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith took part in splitting the twins, and for Obi-Wan to say that boy's our last hope, and Yoda have to tell him no, there's another. Technically, Obi-Wan should already know that.
True,
but that could be just a result of back then not knowing you were going to be able to make 3 more movies.
True.
That's the kind of stuff where you can pull your hair out of your head. But I take that now as saying, of course, Obi-Wan knows about the twins, but maybe he didn't pick up the idea that Leia was as force sensitive as Luke, because clearly she wasn't, and whether she is now, we'll find out in December. Or unless there's some sort of lead in the new canon. But I think that, he's so focused on Luke that becomes his thing. It becomes his tunnel vision. And it would be hard for him not to be that focused when he spent so many years on Tatooine watching over Luke anyway. Any last thoughts on The Empire Strikes Back before we finish our cup of coffee or tea, as the case may be?
No, I actually, it's funny. I think the last discussion I pointed out that Jedi was my favorite film.
Yes.
And I know that is a little unique. It's probably even more unique that I would probably actually rank it third.
Wow, that is very
original
unique.
Trilogy.
Yeah, so you're the one.
But I would say that, but at third in the original trilogy is not a bad place to be, because at the end of the day, I like all 3 of them a lot and will watch all 3 of them.
Right.
What I've noticed, though, is really it has more to do, and maybe this is why you were talking about someone saying that the Yoda scenes are boring, because I can somewhat relate to that a little. I don't find them boring as much as I do Padme and Anakin having their love scenes in episode 2.
Yes.
But, because I find myself doing the same thing, going, okay, let's get to the fight back on Camino.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I actually saw the IMAX version of that movie where those scenes were taken out, and where it did get to those scenes quicker.
Wow.
But I think really the reason for it might be due to the fact that just how times have changed, because now I've seen all 3 of those movies a ton of times, and the ranking is much more about what I'm more in the mood to see or watch again. If Empire's on, I'm going to watch Empire, but I might be more likely to watch the scenes in the asteroid field or on Hoth. I love the Battle of Hoth, or even the stuff in Cloud City, then maybe the stuff that I already know happens on Dagobah, just because I've seen it so many times.
Right. Yeah.
You know, versus, you know, when Empire first hit VHS and all that sort of stuff, we had to watch all of them. It didn't matter. I mean, you know, as much. But I think it's more based on how many times I've seen them and what I like watching the most now, as opposed to what I think is a better film. You know, because like I said, you know, even though it's probably third, you know, I'll watch all three of them when Spike TV does their marathon. You know, I've got it on just like everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, of course, I've said it a million times, but Empire is my favorite. The depth, the places that the characters go and are allowed to go. There's real peril. It's the most intimate of the original three, in my opinion. Introduce the great characters and planets. It's the most you get to see of the Falcon, and the Falcon is my favorite vehicle of all time, so that's one of the reasons I love it so much. And interestingly enough, we're having a conversation about The Empire Strikes Back, and no one has said the words Boba Fett. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
That could be a whole other show, really. But what about you, Corey? Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I can relate to what you said, Scott. When I was a kid, I was really a big fan of Return of the Jedi because I think it was just at that right age. And I really liked Return of the Jedi the most. And as I gotten older, I just really have come to appreciate Empire. So I think it's kind of grown with me. And like you said, Dan, it's just as you get older, you understand the themes and just the intimacy of it as characters driven and arcs and things like that we've talked about. Empire will just go down in history. It already has. I mean, it still is the top of the pile as far as just groundbreaking. You know, the Battle of Hoth was huge. All the special effects and the characters and the new characters and everything that we see is just expanded on as far as the Star Wars trilogy. And I think that Empire itself as a film holds up so well because it just can't be topped. It's just always been back in our memories that it's just been a wonderful film to be able to tell a story through. And I think people always, like you said, Dan, it's like everybody goes for make their sequel and always like, well, is that their Empire Strikes Back? It always will be related to that. And I hope so as far as we move on to these next episodes, 7, 8, and 9.
And I am a big fan of the Family Guy parody of Empire Strikes Back as well.
It is funny.
Something Dark Side, is that right? Yeah. The mechanical camels. Oh, what do they got? Oh, they got mechanical camels.
Perfect. Well, Scott, before we let you go, where can everyone get in contact with you, and when can they hear the newest Assembly of Geeks?
Well, in fact, thanks for asking. I plan on posting that. I mean, we're recording this, and I plan on actually posting the new one here in a couple hours. It is going to be the show that is dedicated to May the 4th. You know, I thought it'd be best, since we do it every Tuesday, to do it the Tuesday before May the 4th instead of after. Mm-hmm. And what was great is the weekend leading into it was the weekend where we see the clip from Rebels on WonderCon. So we talk about that and the reaction to that. We have a really good discussion about the decision relating to Expanded Universe and the new adult book series that are coming out. So perfect timing for those announcements, because it allowed us to dedicate the whole show to Star Wars and still take some time to talk about May the 4th and what we love about it. So as always, that's at assemblyofgeeks.com and on Stitcher and iTunes and all the places where people like to get the podcast. So and it's done in very typical Assembly of Geeks fashion. It's there is Darth Ganon and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, cool. Oh, I can't
awesome.
wait. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what you put poor Jeff through.
Yes, and what we put Jeff through.
Oh, that's great. Well, obviously, friends of our show know Assembly of Geeks is one of the best podcasts out there. All the discussion you want to talk about Star Wars and beyond, well beyond. So, Scott Murray, before we let you go, do you have any specific plans for May the 4th?
As I kind of mentioned on the show, the challenge for me will be picking out what Star Wars T-shirt I'm going to wear to sport my fandom for the day. I have the merch man name for a reason, and that'll be a tough decision. I do know that, like, the Disney stores here in town, I think are supposed to release some new collectibles and toys and things on that day.
Yeah, they are.
So I'm certain that I'll be going to one of the ones here in Dallas to check those out. And if I manage to get around to watch one of the movies, I know it's going to shock everybody. I've been kind of wanting to watch Jedi again, so if I get time, I might watch Jedi. But as I demonstrated before, what I really need to do is get caught up on Clone Wars.
Sure.
Something that I'm way behind in doing, and I know that's
as is my co-host.
Yes, way behind.
Oh, good. I'm glad I'm not alone. I feel like I lose a little bit of geek cred.
Yeah, I know, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
I like Clone Wars. I just never got a chance to get all the way through it. But now that it's on Netflix, we are going to have a marathon very soon.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Well, you'll love it. So we'll have to have you back on to discuss some Clone Wars stuff.
Cool.
This summer we're going to have our Cup of Clone Wars where we look at Season 6 in a lot of detail. So we're looking forward to that. And speaking of looking forward to that, we are excited to have you on again in the future, Scott, where our next one we go through, of course, be A New Hope, the one that started it all. So Scott Murray, our good friend from Assembly of Geeks, thank you so much for being on Coffee with Kenobi with us once again.
My pleasure, guys. Always a pleasure to be here to discuss this with you. You all have a great in-depth Star Wars podcast that has some really good, high-quality discussion that I think is invaluable. So the fact that I can come here and be part of that is an honor. So thanks for having me here.
Wow, thanks so much, Scott.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
Our topic for show number 19 is not so much a topic as it is a guest, the ultimate Star Wars guest, especially if you're a collector, Steve Sansweet. When we first started the show, he was the dream guest of ours, and now that dream is a reality. This is the perfect way to share our first anniversary as a podcast with our fans.
This is where you come in. Please share with us your favorite memories, topics, and concepts we have discussed over the past year, and we will be honored to share them on our 1-year anniversary show. We would not be a podcast without all of you. We want to share this with all of you. In 500 words or less, be sure to send in your thoughts, comments, or an MP3 to feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com.
I like the sound of that.
Echo 3 to Echo 7. Ano, buddy, do you read me?
I saw part of the message.
I seem to have found it.
Our first email comes to us from Ajua Adama, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Hey guys, just recently found out about this podcast as I also recently discovered Dr. Andrea Letamendi's The Arkham Sessions, where she indicated that she was a guest here. Very nice discussion concerning the psychology of Anakin Skywalker / Vader. Since the recent debut of the Clone Wars Season 6, in tandem with Season 3's Mortis trilogy, and also with the novel Darth Plagueis, I've come to look at the role of Anakin from a much different light since the debut of Episode 3. Though Anakin is a person and that his motivation could be scientifically diagnosed, I think that the key to truly understanding what occurs on screen is Anakin's divine attribute. His virgin birth, as with other deities the world over, included Heru, what the Greeks called Horus of the Nile Valley, places him on a path of the divine purpose. And the act of balancing the Force takes on a rather Old Testament, fire and brimstone approach to setting things right. As with the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, even the innocent get caught up in those efforts. In essence, he's Shiva, the balancer and destroyer when the Force deems it necessary. This is a response to another post concerning the same subject about why Anakin became a Force ghost at the end. I've often argued that Anakin is the Force itself personified. While it appears that George used Eastern religions like Buddhism and Hinduism as his templates for what the Force might be, I think the will of the Force is modeled after the Old Testament fire and brimstone nature of God. The Sith only succeed when the Force allows it, as it is all-powerful. When the Jedi lost their way, becoming political and corrupt, the Force allows the dark side to grow stronger, which will lead to the temporary destruction of the Jedi since they need to be reborn and remade. In the midst of that, you have Anakin born of a virgin birth. The Force wills him into existence, and he acts as a balancer. He will destroy the corruption within the Jedi by destroying them literally. He will also destroy the Sith once the Jedi have renewed their commitment to the true path of the light side and are ready to move forward, symbolized by Luke throwing down of the saber upon defeating Vader. Under normal circumstances, as Yoda says, once you start down the dark path, it will forever dominate your destiny. But I post that's only true of regular beings. Anakin is the exception because he is the Force personified. Therefore, once he fulfills his destiny and destroys Palpatine, he wouldn't need to learn how to resurrect his consciousness. It would just happen, and of course, dying in the act of saving his son counts as a selfless act. which is paramount in the power of retaining one's consciousness. And my feeling is that this only happens for Jedi that serve the purpose of guiding the Order in these new dark times, as Obi-Wan did with Luke. It's leading me to believe we will see both Yoda and Anakin in Episode 7 or beyond, as they still might serve a major purpose as the Jedi Order needs to be rebuilt. And that's again from Majua Dama. Great insights. I love the comparison to Eastern religions and other things. The idea of Anakin being the Force personified is a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way, where the Force willed a child to be born or to become a balancing force, force for force. It's interesting that the Force would do that. I mean, it's all a unique essence of it that bring about an organism to kind of keep itself in control. It's fascinating. That's well done.
Our next email is actually an MP3 from Mike Garrigan, who sends us great MP3s, and he talks a little bit about Paul McDonald and the Star Wars heresies and his thoughts.
I really enjoyed the Star Wars heresies, particularly the section on Episode 1, and specifically the chapter on Jar Jar Binks. Personally, I've always found Jar Jar quite endearing and somewhat tragic. I understand why most Star Wars fans find him annoying, but I like how Paul McDonald discusses Jar Jar with a certain archetypal and intellectual significance. Highlighting his role as the fool/frog prince is something I had never considered. Noting his Zen-like state throughout Episode 1, it's an interesting perspective, too. Jar Jar's never contemplating the stars or navel-gazing. The Force is with him. My favorite quote from this chapter is, quote, "Honestly, is it any more absurd to paint Jar Jar as a thoughtfully constructed Taoist meditation on the virtue of uselessness than it is to regard him as a CGI monstrosity that single-handedly ruined the franchise and promoted racism?" End quote. No, it's not. Very good point. What I like most about the heresies is that it illustrates a certain depth that's within the prequels that gets lost when fans air how these films somehow didn't meet their expectations. Thank you so much for recommending and discussing this awesome book. May the Force be with you.
Well, thanks, Mike. That was great. Again, we love hearing from you, and we love Paul's book. Obviously, we're big fans. His chapter on Jar Jar is revealed that there's more to Jar Jar than meets the eye, so look forward to hearing what everybody else thinks about that as well.
Yeah, Paul was a great guest, great guy to talk to, too, as well. He's got some great ideas. Prequels and Jar Jar's chapter was great as far as all the expansion, as far as what his role he plays in the films. Thanks very much for the MP3.
Dear Coffee with Kenobi, hello, Dan and Corey. First off, love the show and listen to it all the time. 2 thoughts. My first thought on the Star Wars EU is a relaunching announcement from yesterday. This news about the Star Wars EU relaunch is not a shock to me and good news at the same time. Looking forward to the new Star Wars novels coming out. I like the EU, but I've only read a few books. My favorite EU novels are mostly the standalone novels and the official stuff too. I like to pick and choose the Star Wars novels I read. The good news all around about the EU's fate. Secondly, my thoughts on the recent episode about the Star Wars prequels with Brian Young of Full Sith and Paul F. McDonald, writer of the Star Wars heresies. I enjoy the prequels and like them a lot. My favorite of the prequels is Revenge of the Sith. Sure, there are some issues with the films, but overall I think the prequels were a good addition to the Star Wars universe. Also the Clone Wars as well. They improved some of the things that were unclear in the prequels and the whole context of things. Brian Young and Paul McDonald made some good points on why the prequels are good and had some good moments in them. Anyway, those are my thoughts on those 2 recent topics in Star Wars fandom. Keep up the good work with Coffee with Kenobi, and may the Force be with you always. Sincerely, long-time and loyal listener, Kenny Crawley Jr. from Ohio. Well, Kenny, we always love to hear from you. He's so active on Facebook and is always letting us know about the most recent Star Wars news, so we really appreciate that.
And not only that, he gives his little thoughts as far as his voice and fandom, and as far as the EU and Paul's book and having Brian on. They were great guests, and I love when fans write in and tell us how much they like our guests, because I know we're choosing some great folks out there, and there's tons more we got lined up for fans. Thanks, Kenny, for the email.
Chewie, get us out of here!
If you'd like to respond to a question of our show, have a comment, or just want to say hello, send us an email or MP3 at feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com. Or if you'd have a specific question or a comment for either of us individually, email us at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. or Corey C. at coffeewithkenobi.com, or visit us at coffeewithkenobi.com, Contact Us section, or comment on one of our stories featured on the site. If you enjoy the show, please write a review in iTunes. You can also like our show at Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, as well as keep up to date on our Twitter feed at twitter.com/coffeewithkenobi. You can also find us on Tumblr at coffeewithkenobi.tumblr.com. If you enjoy the jazz music, download the album Eye to Eye by Steve Torok on iTunes.
Give the evacuation code signal.
That's it for show number 18 of Coffee with Kenobi. A big thank you to Scott Murray and Christian Blauvelt for having a cup of coffee with us and for discussing The Empire Strikes Back and all the latest Star Wars news. Be sure to check out Scott's excellent podcast, The Assembly of Geeks, and be sure to check out assemblyofgeeks.com.
Thanks to Rob from the Bearded Trio and to everyone who contributed to this show, and to all of you out there who listen and email Coffee with Kenobi. Don't forget to send us your comments and opinions on our topic for show number 19, Steve Sansweet and our 1-year anniversary.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney or their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi, unless otherwise indicated.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.